As the world hangs on at the edge of a recession, no one wants to see China tipping into an economic landslide. Ever since China ditched its 3-year zero-COVID policy back in December, the world's second largest economy hasn't been performing at its peak. It's like they're not firing on all cylinders, you know. Now, China is grappling with a debt of more than $23 trillion. And all we can do is see this disaster unfold. China's economy is far from roaring back to its double-digit growth days of the 2010s. Now, a strong comeback from China would be a saving grace for the global economy, countering the expected slowdown in other parts of the world. Those pesky central banks and their tightening policies over the past year and a half are to blame for that mess. Back in the day, China's massive stimulus package after the 2008-2009 financial crisis was like a shot in the arm for the global economy. You see, China just couldn't get enough imported raw materials for its shiny infrastructure projects. Except all that stimulus action left China drowning in a sea of debt. In March, the International Monetary Fund dropped a bombshell, warning that Chinese local government debt alone has skyrocketed. Oh, and let's not forget about the whole Taiwan debacle. China keeps threatening to invade Taiwan, which has got the West all hot and bothered. And let's not get started on China's cozy relationship with Russia and their so-called neutrality and the whole Ukraine mess. These spicy situations are putting global economic collaboration in serious jeopardy. Yikes! Professor Pushan Dutt from the INSEAD Business School in Singapore spilled some serious tea on this. If tensions keep escalating or if war breaks out, we're in for a seismic shift, folks. Brace yourselves for multinational companies making a swift exit from China, export markets slamming shut, and the inevitable imposition of sanctions. Oh, and remember those trade tensions between China and the U.S. during the Trump era? Well, they're still alive and kicking, even under President Joe Biden's watch. U.S. sanctions slapped left and right on Chinese companies and officials, and even restrictions on China's access to semiconductor and AI technology, all in the name of national security, of course. And here's the cherry on top. Chinese President Xi Jinping and his assertive foreign policy have caused the U.S. and other Western countries to start questioning their economic ties with China. They're starting to pull away and minimize risks, like a relationship gone sour. It's weakening a key factor that propelled China's rapid growth in the past. So folks, it's time to face the harsh realities of China's ongoing economic crisis. Finally, Beijing is waking up to its deep-rooted financial problems. After procrastinating for over a year, it has taken some steps to pump money into its struggling property sector. It even introduced a new law to address risks. But here's the catch. These moves only provide temporary relief. They fail to tackle China's underlying economic troubles and the impact they have on global markets. The size of China's debt problem is mind-boggling. The latest data shows that the country's debt, including both public and private sectors, has skyrocketed to a mind-boggling $51.9 trillion. To put that in perspective, it's nearly 3 times the size of China's entire economy. This debt level is the highest ever recorded in Beijing's 27-year tracking history. And guess what? It's expected to get worse. According to the Beijing-supported National Institution for Finance and Development, local authorities are projected to take on an additional 4 trillion yuan, or $570 billion in new debt next year. China's debt burden far exceeds that of the United States. Back in 2020, the U.S. had more debt relative to its GDP than China. But as of mid-2022, China's debt burden stood 40% higher than America's. If this doesn't ring alarm bells, consider that wealthier countries like the U.S. typically handle higher debt burdens more easily than less developed economies like China's. The truth is, Beijing is sitting on a ticking time bomb. Temporary measures won't cut it. China needs to confront its economic challenges head-on. As its debt continues to pile up, the risk of a full-blown crisis grows every day. It's high time for Beijing to implement comprehensive reforms and address these issues before it's too late. The clock is ticking, and the stakes couldn't be higher for China's economy and the global financial landscape. It looks like China's to be blamed for the chaos happening globally. A dozen poor countries are teetering on the edge of economic instability and even collapse, all thanks to the massive foreign loans they've taken, primarily from none other than China, the world's biggest and most unforgiving government lender. The Associated Press was eager to investigate this ongoing debacle. When the AP dug into the debt situations of countries like Pakistan, Kenya, Zambia, Laos, and Mongolia, it uncovered a grim reality. The burden of repaying these loans is devouring an ever-increasing portion of their tax revenue, leaving them struggling to provide basic needs like education, electricity, and food. To make matters worse, it's depleting their foreign currency reserves, the very funds they need to pay the interest on these loans. Some countries are left with only a few months before they run out of money entirely. Talk about being in dire straits. Now, here's the kicker. China doesn't exactly have a reputation for forgiving debt, and they're incredibly secretive about the terms and amounts of money they've loaned out. This secrecy has deterred other major lenders from stepping in to offer assistance. And if that wasn't enough, a recent revelation exposed that borrowers were forced to deposit cash in hidden escrow accounts, effectively prioritizing China over other creditors when it comes to getting paid back. In the countries examined by the AP, as much as 50% of their foreign loans came from China, and the majority of their government revenue was allocated to servicing these debts. It's a never-ending cycle of debt payments. Zambia and Sri Lanka have already defaulted, unable to make even interest payments on loans that finance the construction of crucial infrastructure projects like ports, mines, and power plants. The consequences are devastating. In Pakistan, the textile industry has taken a massive hit, resulting in millions of workers losing their jobs. The country is drowning in foreign debt and can't even afford to keep the lights on or the machines running. Kenya is no better off. The government has resorted to withholding paychecks from civil service workers just to scrape together enough cash to pay off their foreign loans. The president's chief economic advisor even tweeted a grim ultimatum: salaries or default, take your pick. And let's not forget Sri Lanka. Since defaulting on its debts a year ago, the country has witnessed the disappearance of 500,000 industrial jobs, rampant inflation exceeding 50%, and widespread poverty affecting over half the population in many regions. Experts are sounding the alarm, warning that unless China shows some leniency with its loans to these struggling countries, we could be witnessing a wave of even more defaults and severe political upheaval. The clock has struck midnight, and China's involvement has left behind a ticking time bomb of geopolitical instability that could have far-reaching consequences. There may be one man who could be getting in the way of things turning around. According to Sang, it's evident that Xi Jinping desires a more dynamic, vibrant, strong, and innovative Chinese economy. However, his policies often result in the opposite effect, hindering progress. Sang goes on to explain that with Xi consolidating his power and refusing to acknowledge mistakes, it becomes nearly impossible for technocrats in China to implement the necessary adjustments to revitalize the economy. This lack of flexibility and adaptability stifles potential growth. Despite these challenges, the International Monetary Fund predicts that China will remain the largest contributor to global economic growth in the next 5 years, accounting for a remarkable 22.6% of total world growth. In contrast, the United States is projected to contribute only 11.3%. While the Western demand slowdown continues to impact Chinese exports negatively, there is reason for optimism within the domestic economy. After enduring 3 years of COVID-related lockdowns, there is pent-up demand waiting to be unleashed. Dutch highlights the impressive fact that Chinese consumers have accumulated a staggering $2.6 trillion in excess savings during the pandemic. This surplus indicates that the services sector can expect to play a crucial role in picking up the slack in the short term. So, despite the challenges posed by Xi's hold on power, China's economy still has some positives to cheer about, especially when considering the potential boost from domestic consumer spending and pent-up demand after the pandemic. And that's all we know about China's ongoing economic collapse. Comment below and stay with us for more developments across the pond.